Good morning, Year 11. If you would open up your exercise books, please, and write the title P2Q5 and today's date, and we'll get started on your Do Now. Okay, once you've done that, let's look at your Do Now for today. And yes, I will email these to you. Just haven't done that yet. Okay, so here's today's. Every council should be expected to provide decent, high quality services to support and care for homeless people in their area. Write an article for a local newspaper in which you persuade its readers to support your opinion on this statement. So, what you need to do is, as always, if you would copy down the part that's in italics. Okay, so you should have this written down, or you will do in just a moment. Make a note to yourself, of course, you always write down on your page a reminder that you need to use a forest. And in a box here, you write down a reminder to yourself of the writing frame. And then in this area here, you're doing your actual planning. Now, it did say to write an article for a newspaper. So I like to make a little note to myself to remember to do that article. So, of course, that means I'm going to make sure that I come up with a headline. And we've talked about good devices for the headline. Might be alliteration, or could be a rhetorical question. So if you look at the question, you have two different parts here. So the first one is every council should be expected to provide decent, high quality services, okay, to support and care. Sorry for the Claudia noise in the background. To support and care for homeless people in their area. Actually, it's to support is the first thing to look at, and then care. So you don't have to separate those, but if you wanted to, you could start off by defining what support is for homeless people and what care is, because you could argue for a high level answer that they're two different things. Okay, if my colleague would pause the video in just a moment. Everyone should be planning here. You're either planning in the agree, disagree method. Yeah, like this, as we've been doing, or you're planning in kind of a mind mapping way. Okay, so if my colleague would pause the video now and give you about 3 minutes. Okay, after 3 minutes, normally we would discuss some ideas today, but today we're not going to do that as I'm not there. Apologies. Just a reminder that you can email your answers into me and I will mark those for you. I received about 4 yesterday, I think, so well done to those 4 people. And I will mark those as soon as I can. That might be over Easter, but you're welcome to complete this bit and send that in to me. Okay, next up, you need your booklets, please. So make sure you have your booklets out, and we're going to be on page 17. You also need a pen, purple pen, and highlighter. I'll give you just 30 seconds to get all of that ready. Okay, today we're looking at how you answer paper 2, question 2. Okay, paper 2, question 2. First of all, a bit of retrieval practice. So I'd like you to think about an inspector calls. In what order are the characters interviewed? Okay, so if you could jot those down in order, you've got a bit more room than I've got on my page. Are they interviewed? Which character admits to being envious or jealous? And altruistic, that's a word that we went over when we were learning about this play. Does altruistic mean selfish, self-absorbed, or selfless? Circle one of those and then write down which character you think can be described, or characters, as altruistic. Okay, so about shouldn't take you more than 3 minutes to do that. Okay, let's make sure now that you've had 3 minutes that you get out your purple pens so that you can either tick your answers for being correct or write in the correct answers. Okay, so the order the characters are interviewed, it starts off with Mr. Burling, because of course he fired Eva. Then it goes to Sheila because she was rude to her in the shop and got her fired. Then Gerald because he supported her when she didn't have a job. Then Mrs. Burling because of course Eva goes to her for help once she's pregnant. And then finally with Eric. Number 2, the character who admits to being envious is Sheila, and that's because of Eva's appearance. Altruistic means selfless. And at the end of the play, you could say that Sheila is now selfless. She's a dynamic character, so she has changed and she wants to help people. I suppose you could say Eric, but I think there's an argument there for Sheila being more altruistic than Eric. All right, purple pen's away and normal pen. Let's do a little pause here for reflection, and we'll speak more about this tomorrow when I'm back with you. What do you need to do before the May mock examinations to prepare? Now, I don't want you just to write revise. I want you to be very specific. So if you could just jot down J and H for Jekyll and Hyde, AIC for inspector calls, paper 1 for language paper 1, and paper 2 for language paper 2. I want you to think to yourself just for 30 seconds and go ahead and start jotting down ideas, what you personally need to do for each one of those. Now, you'll notice I've not included Macbeth or the Unseen Poetry, and that's because I still don't know if you're going to be required to sit those or if I'll be able to offer those to you as options. Okay, 30 seconds, jot down some ideas. No need to pause, colleague. I'll come back in 20 seconds. Okay, here is what I would recommend. For Jekyll and Hyde, you need to make sure that you know the plot, all right? If you haven't read the book, I don't think that's very many of you, but it's probably too late to spend too much time reading much of the book. But you need to know the plot. So you have 2 study guides that go over chapter by chapter what happens. I've also put a video on Instagram that you can find where I go over what to do with that plot, and it's about testing yourself once you read what happens in each chapter. Then you need to look at exam questions, and there are exam questions in the back of the revision booklet that I gave you yesterday, also in the study guides as well. You need to practice planning for those. And that includes memorizing key quotations. Okay. There's lots of information on Google Classroom about Jekyll and Hyde as well. And of course, I will be sharing the spreadsheet with you that gives you some links to various things that you can memorize. Okay, with an inspector calls, very similar to Jekyll and Hyde. So making sure that you know the plot. I do have a study guide that I can give you for inspector calls if you like, so remind me tomorrow and I will give those to you. And again, it's looking at exam questions. Practice the planning of those, because remember, for inspector calls, they don't give you an extract, so all quotations and so forth need to be from memory. When we return after Easter, we will spend time approaching these 2 things, okay? So just be aware of that. Paper 1, you need to practice in timed conditions, especially question 5 And I would say especially question 4. And in the back of the booklet that I gave you yesterday, there are several different questions for you to practice with. Again, I'm a broken record here. I keep saying this, but remember, if you complete any of that revision, send it to me. I will mark it. I will add it in as part of your evidence. If you're sending that to me over Easter, that's absolutely fine. Just know that you won't get it back until we return. That's because A, I need a bit of a break, and B, I'll be working on my next master's essay. Same thing for paper 2. Make sure you know the order of each question. We didn't really remember that yesterday, did we? So you need to revise that. And you also need to practice question 5, which is what we've been working on, the articles or letters or speeches. And then I would also say question 4, which we will talk more about tomorrow. Okay, moving on. Today we're going to look at paper 2, question 2. To do that, first of all, you need to read the sources. Let's look at the question first. So I'm not sure what page you're on, probably about 18 or 19 or so. All right. The question is under task 4. So if you would just turn to that. You need to refer to source A and source B for this question. Both writers explore the changes which occur at C. Use details from both sources to write a summary of the different changes which can occur at C. This is 8 marks, right? So we know that we're going to be spending about 12 minutes or so when writing this. A reminder of what it looks like. You have 2 short paragraphs. You write about source A first. You make a statement. You use a quotation, then an inference, another quotation, and an inference if you can. Then you write a separate paragraph about source B, and we're looking for differences. So instead of similarly for this one, it'll be on the other hand. The writer source B portrays changes at C, and then we'll make a statement, quotation, inference. And then this is really crucial. I think this is in color on your version. Put a little tick here. You've got to compare back to source A. All right. So here's how we're going to do this. We've checked to see if we're looking at similarities or differences. Today it's differences. We've highlighted the focus of the question. Now you need to identify and highlight evidence from the text. So what you're going to do now is you're going to read the sources to yourself, highlight any evidence where they're talking about the changes that can occur at C. So let's start off with source A. I like to make a note to myself on the top what I'm looking for, just to remind myself, changes at C. All right. So you're going to read, actually, I'll read a bit of this to you and then have you do some of it on your own. Here we go. Revealed, how to stay safe at the beach. Britain's coastline is blessed with sunny seaside spots for all the family to enjoy, but the sea is powerful, so refresh your memory about the hidden dangers and how to deal with them. According to the 2 biggest beach safety and drowning prevention charities in Britain, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, the Royal Life Saving UK, the greatest threat to a typical family trip to the seaside probably won't come from sharks or jellyfish, but from rip currents, tides, and offshore winds. These may not sound as menacing, but each year more visitors to Britain's beaches get in trouble because of them than anything else. Now we know that rip currents, tides, and winds are all things that can change, so that's why I've highlighted that. Okay? So what I'd like you to do now is we'll pause the video. I want you to read just source A, and I want you to highlight anything that talks about the changes that can occur at the sea. All right, so if my colleague will pause the video, give you about 3 minutes to do that. Okay, we're back. Before we go over what we've found, I just want to show you how you're marked for this question. So as you can see, it goes up to perceptive and judicious, right? Perceptive and judicious. Okay, so looking over here, what you're aiming for is clear and relevant. So making sure that you mention a clear difference between the sources, relevant text detail, and a clear inference. Now remember, an inference is something that you figure out based on the text. So let's have a look here. at what I have found. Now, it mentions the rip currents. And so I've highlighted the fact that they're dangerous because they're stronger and faster, that they appear as dark water, as calm areas, etc. Out to the side, I'm just going to make a note to myself that I'm inferring, they keep talking about how they're dangerous and about how it's like a giant water treadmill you can't turn off. So I'm going to put that it reveals a lack of control for us when we're out in the ocean. Okay, that riptides, you fall into them. You may not even see them as they appear as calm areas. This is a good little reminder before it gets nice and warm and we start getting out into the ocean. It's like a lack of control. So that's what we can infer. That's why they're so dangerous. We don't see them and they're hard to see. Okay. Then with the tides, it repeats this idea that you need to find out when the tide is coming back in, know the time tides. And it talks about how the tide can quickly come in without realizing it, you're cut off. So the method being used here is repetition. This method that is being used up here, of course, is a simile. All right, make sure that you've marked all of that. Now, with the winds, it talks about how drownings occur when people don't pay proper attention to the wind. So, all three of these things have something in common. The changes occur, and people need to be aware. Now, this one talks about how the winds change, and so people can be blown out far to sea. The question is saying different changes which can occur at sea. So I'm going to argue that actually you don't need to write about the wind. We could just write about the rip currents and the tides. Okay. So, but what we're inferring from this first source is that there are changes that happen. People need to be aware of these changes, that they're dangerous, and smart beachgoers who want to stay safe require preparation. Okay, capiche? You understand? Capiche. Curtis, nod your head. Excellent. Okay, now what I want you to do, please, is look at source B. Remember, we're looking for the changes at sea. Okay, remember the second source is always going to be an older source. So highlight any evidence here about the changes that occur at sea. All right, so pause this now, 3 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes is now up. Now, as you can see from my page, I found quite a bit to highlight, but remember, this is only an 8-mark question and you only have 12 minutes. So we need to choose our best evidence. And I think our best evidence comes from looking at this second paragraph here. So it mentions that the sea is always changing. So that might be, that's an adverb. Something that we want to mention, that the writer says it's always changing. Now, this is a very positive source, and it's very different. This is just a description of someone who's been to see the sea. It's very positive, as you can see from the title, The Pleasures of Life. And the changes at sea that they're describing here it's quite a beautiful description. It's all about what the sea looks like. So it's about the appearances. Remember, anything I write down, you write down. So it's the appearances of the sea. So team 1, make sure you're writing this down. Team 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you. The appearances of the sea. And so we just want to look at some of the things that he says. Talks about the colors. So you could use, I'm going to choose, let's see. I want to mention, first of all, the violet mist. That's quite pretty. So we can use that as evidence, put a star by that. And then it contrasts it with the color that has faded from the sea. Contrast that. Now, what can we infer from this? We can infer that that the changes, rather than dangerous, like they're mentioned in the first source, that they're quite beautiful. All right. that is enough evidence from this source. So, a reminder, turn to this page, of what your question looks like. Arguably, the writer of source A presents statement, so we use SQI, statement, quotation, inference, and then another quotation and inference. If you can only think of one, that's okay. Just do as much as you can to get as many marks as you can. And what we're going to do next is we're actually going to do some deliberate practice. You can circle we do, because I'm going to do the first paragraph with you. All right. So in your exercise books, please, and don't moan. I'm here to help virtually, if not in actually there. So exercise books open. Uh, 31st of March. This is paper 2, question 2. As far as the methods, you can use, as you can see, we're looking at quotation. So that gives you a big hint that we're looking at the language here. And here we go with the first paragraph. Okay, I've now written the first paragraph for you. So if you would copy that down, please. My colleague would just pause the video and let you write that down. Right, welcome back. Let's have a look at the different components of this paragraph so that you can see what I've done here. Arguably, the writer of source A presents the different changes that occur at C as dangerous. That's my statement. So that's the overall statement. He writes that the riptide is like a giant water treadmill. From this simile, we can infer that riptides are dangerous because once you are in one, it is difficult to get out. So here we have the quotation. And then we had the inference.